Around in political circles that there's the prospect of an early federal election sometime later this year, if indeed Tony Abbott can lift his standing in the opinion polls off the back of the 2015 federal budget. It becomes even more important to clarify any reforms that are intended to deal with what are called micro-parties. Now, at the moment in the Senate, we have people who have been elected on a primary vote of just, well, hardly anybody at all. For instance, here in Victoria, Ricky Muir from the Motoring Enthusiasts Party. By stitching together preference deals with a whole lot of other small organisations that are running candidates in the Senate, you end up, in fact, getting a Senate quota when you hardly had any votes in your own right. Well, it looks as if the big parties might be ganging up on the little parties to make sure that never happens again. Glenn Druery has made a name for himself, a reputation, and also a career as what's called the preference whisperer, the man who puts together a lot of these behind-the-scenes deals. Glenn, good morning to you.
Good morning, John.
Looks as if the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters in the Federal Parliament is trying to do you in.
Well, I think I'd just like to quote something you just said, the big guys ganging up against the little guys, and to an extent that is exactly what's happening. Yes, you are right, the Joint Standing Committee into Electoral Matters have decided that they want the ball to play their way, and they want to do all they can to stop the likes of Ricky Muir and other, what I like to call ordinary Australians, entering the political process.
Now, on the face of it, what they're doing is for the integrity of the system to be restored. I mean, there is something weird about getting elected to Parliament with just a handful of actual supporters voting for you.
Well, look, you could certainly argue that, but, I would say, what type of democracy do you want, and why are these reforms being pushed anyway? And if you really look a little bit deeper into that, who will be the beneficiaries if we get rid of the group voting ticket, or if we get rid of the system that we have now and adopt a system that is being supported by the Joint Standing Committee into Electoral Matters? The Labor Party have woken up. In fact, we read this morning in Fairfax that the Labor Party is starting to walk away from this, and there's good reason for that, because certainly into the short to intermediate term, the Greens will be the huge beneficiaries, and they are very likely, under an optional preferential system, to take a Senate seat away from Labor in every state. However, I'll qualify that by saying the smart operators within the Greens who understand the numbers realise that that's not necessarily the case. The Greens numbers could drop. It could certainly drop in states like South Australia, Queensland, WA, into the longer term. So ultimately, who is the real beneficiary of this? And it is the coalition.
So what are the measures that are being proposed by the Standing Committee on Electoral Matters that would supposedly be the death knell for micro-parties? What are they wanting?
Look, there's a number of things, and I'll keep it as simple as I can, but certainly to get rid of the group voting ticket would make it almost impossible for minor parties to be elected.
What do you mean by the group voting ticket?
Look, that's a simple question that involves a very complex answer. Effectively, it means being able to distribute preferences so that one can build up one's tally from a relatively small amount into that of a quota or approaching a quota and get elected. Now, if we get rid of that, and if we adopt the system of above-the-line optional preferential voting, the bottom line is within 2 electoral cycles, the coalition may well control the Senate on their own.
Let's go through the problems. I mean, the problems seem from the point of view of ordinary Australians rather than political tragics, Glenn. The problems are, first of all, you've got ballot papers now that extend out like, 2 metres long or a metre long.
And 1.2 metres to be exact.
Okay, and that is absurdly complex. Do you agree?
Well, is it? Is it really?
Yes, it is.
Well, hang on a minute, John. Hang on a minute. I'm not exaggerating when I say that there are places around the world where people are literally dying to vote.
Totally understand. That doesn't mean you need a voting paper that's incomprehensible.
If our biggest problem is a lot of people want to get elected, I don't think that's a problem at all. I think that is a wonderful example of what a great and mature democracy we have in this country, that you or me or any of your listeners can be upset about an issue or 2 or 3 or whatever.
Sure, but every crank and crackpot who wants to go into Parliament shouldn't necessarily be given the same chance or opportunity as someone who is a serious political contender.
you're not seriously suggesting that all of the backbenchers in the major parties are serious political contenders?
No, there's a whole lot of seat warmers, but at least they understand the way the system works.
Well, do they? I would question that. I mean, I've been in and around politics for a long time, and I can assure you, and I won't mention any names, but there are many people who sit on the backbench who follow the party line. The whip says we're voting this way, the whip says we vote that way, and that's exactly what they do. There is no doubt in my mind that you get far more bang for your buck from an independent or from a minor party.
So is it proposed that, first of all, you lift the threshold of the number of people who have to nominate you and the amount of money that you pay? Wouldn't that go a fair way to cutting back the number of candidates? Look,
it would, and let me talk on those 2 points. Firstly, raising the money for people to pay for their nom-fees or registering a party, I think, is totally wrong. We could, if we look at that in the extreme, when we first came to this country a couple of hundred years ago, in those days, only white men who owned land could vote. Now, no one wants to go back to that or anywhere near that. So why is it that we would punish low to middle income earners and raising the fees?
What do you have to pay now to nominate?
Now you're testing me. I think it's about $500 per candidate.
What's wrong with saying, if you're actually fair dinkum about it, $5,000?
Okay, well, let's just say you are running because you're supporting unemployed people and you're unemployed yourself. Where are you going to get the $5,000 from? Now, I think that's a real problem. Your first point of raising the numbers to form a political party, I have no problem with that. If you are trying to run any political party and you're serious, then you can go and find, well, at the moment it's 500 people to form a political party.
Okay, here's an idea for you. Put this in your pipe and smoke it, Glenn. You either have to have 5,000 signatures nominating you or $5,000 to nominate yourself, one or the other, and that overcomes your problem of low-income people who don't have the money but do have a solid support base.
Well, in principle, I agree with you. Now, in Fiji, to form a political party, you do need 5,000, and that's a lot. I mean, while I think 5,000 might be a bit too much, 500 is certainly not enough. And it's not just the number, be it 500 or 5,000. The way we can register political parties at the moment, and I think this really has to be addressed, you can bung up a Facebook page and put some rather emotive things on that page with some scary pictures and whatnot. And essentially, and I'm no IT expert, but to push here to join the party, click on this button and bang, Bob's your uncle. Within a few weeks, you've got your 500 members and you can register that with the Electoral Commission.
Time's running away from us, but Glenn, just finally, what worries me mostly is that these changes could be introduced without any serious public discussion, and it can change forever our democracy before anyone's even realised it.
And that is a worry. Of course, we have been through the committee process with the Joint Standing Committee, and people did have the opportunity to put forward their point of view then. But you did raise an interesting point in your introduction that the government is potentially looking for an early election. In my view, they will see how this rather soft core budget that they're proposing, that they're going to put up next week, is accepted by the public. And if the opinion polls are improving for Tony Abbott, then he may bung on an early election. Okay,
well, we'll wait and see what happens if indeed it does happen. Where are you at the moment?
Well, I'm at Coffs Harbour, sitting in what they call the bowls room at a bowling club, involved in a charity bicycle ride from Sydney to the Gold Coast. That's for the Chris Riley Youth Off the Streets program.
Oh, okay, raising money, what, a bit like a polypedal like Tony Abbott does? Are you...
Well, unlike the polypedal, we're not interested in self-promotion. We're interested in helping kids who fall through the cracks and need a bit of a hand up. So if anybody would like to kick the can and donate to the Chris Riley Youth Off the Streets program, search that on the internet and
off you go from there. Good on you, Glenn. I'll let you get back in the saddle, and thanks for taking our call today. The man called the Preference Whisperer, who advises micro parties, Glenn Druery.